If somebody asked you to write down the steps necessary to make a cup of tea, how would you do it? Well, you could choose to use numbers like this. You could put number 1, put the kettle on. Number 2, put a tea bag in your mug. Or you could use words like this: firstly, secondly, and finally. Words such as firstly, secondly, and finally are words that we use to put our ideas into order when we're writing. And another way of describing order is sequence. So sequence just being a fancy word for order, we can describe these types of words as sequencing words. These are words that help us to put our ideas in order and to let the reader know what's coming next. And they're not just used for recipes. We can use sequencing words when we're writing articles, emails, when we're writing formal letters. They help us to put our ideas in order, and they guide the reader, if you like, through the flow of our writing. And since sequencing words often come at the start of a new paragraph, they're also there to remind us when we need to start a new paragraph. So let's take a look at an example. Imagine that we want to write a formal letter of complaint to a bus company to complain about their terrible service. And there are 4 points that we want to get across. The first point is that the buses are often late. The buses are often dirty. The drivers are often rude. And the bus fares are extremely high. We'll start our letter with an introduction which sets out the reason why we are writing. Dear Sir, I'm writing to complain about the bus service. I use your buses every day and I find the service very poor. This is our opening paragraph. Okay, so we will start our next paragraph with our first complaint, and we'll begin this paragraph with the sequencing word firstly. And the first complaint is about the buses being late. So we'll say firstly, comma, and then a few lines, a few sentences about the buses being late. Full stop. We'll begin a next paragraph where we will talk about our second complaint, which is the buses being dirty. And as you probably guessed, we will use the sequencing word secondly to start our second complaint. Now, what happens if you want to give a little bit more information about the buses being dirty? Because you're on the same subject, it's not yet time to change paragraph to add a new one. You want to include that information in the very same paragraph. You could use a word like also, but even better, if you want to give more or additional information in a paragraph, there's a nice little phrase that you can use: in addition. So maybe you want to say that at all times of night and day the buses smell of burgers. You could begin the sentence by saying, in addition, I find that whenever I board your buses, they smell of burgers. Now you can use the word also. It's not out of the question. So sometimes you might want to write something like, also the buses smell of burgers. But one rule to be aware of is that we never start a sentence with also. A word like also comes before, directly before, the main verb, which in this case is smell. So if we wanted to provide a little bit more information by using the word also rather than in addition, we would say the buses also smell of burgers. Let's move on to our next complaint. Now, our next complaint is about the bus drivers being rude. Now, what sequencing word can we use? We're not ready to use finally because we've got a bit more to say. You'd be forgiven for thinking that the next sequencing word would be firstly, secondly, thirdly. But you know what? Thirdly is kind of a weird sounding word, and it's not very often used in written English. A nicer expression to use at this point, or a nicer sequencing word, is the expression or the word furthermore. So we will begin the next paragraph, which talks about the bus driver being rude, using this word, furthermore. So what have we got so far? We've got firstly, secondly, we've added in a bit of information using in addition, although we can use also, but we must remember to put it right here before the verb. And then as we're going on to our third complaint, we're using this lovely word, furthermore. And this takes us now to our final complaint. Now, we start our final complaint, as you probably guessed, by using the sequencing word finally. And our final complaint is about the fares being so high. So we would say something like, finally, comma, your fares have gone up 3 times this year and the most expensive in the region. Full stop, and we end that paragraph. When we come to our final paragraph, we're going to ask for something to be done. I'd be grateful if you could reply before the end of the month, letting me know what plans you have to make improvements to your service. So there you have it. We've used these fantastic sequencing words like firstly, secondly, furthermore, and finally to help to organise, to order, to sequence your ideas. And we're also using them so that we know where to start the new paragraph. And we've used words like in addition to give more information when we're not ready to start a new paragraph because we're talking about the same subject. And using these sequencing words will make your writing much easier to follow, much easier to understand, and much more successful.